Hello, listeners, and welcome to part 2 of the mini-series looking at the children of the Rajneesh movement with Sam Jahara, psychotherapist and counsellor. If you'd like to get in touch with Sam, you can find her at brightonandhovepsychotherapy.com or follow the link in the episode description. If you'd also like early access, ad-free full-length episodes on a weekly basis, you can sign up to patreon.com/the Cult Vault for only £1 a month. In part 1, Sam spoke with us about the birth of the Rajneesh movement and how it changed over time, how her parents became involved and what that meant for her as a child becoming involved in the Rajneesh movement. To bring you the second and final part of this mini-series, here is Sam Jahara. I spoke to Nicola Ranson about her upcoming book, A Slice of Orange. In her book, she spoke about the difficulties in the open relationships and the open sexuality that was encouraged. And so people would come to her, she would have to be okay with her partner, who she loved deeply, going off to be with other women. And when Nicola would express concerns around how her mental health was being affected, she was told to go and do the same thing, to go and meditate, to work harder at your practice, to devote yourself further to Rajneesh. It doesn't translate with, first of all, that's not the answer. She, I think, had every right psychologically to be, feeling the way that she was feeling. Absolutely. Secondly, that doesn't translate with children. You can't punish children and then punish them for being punished.
Mm-hmm.
And to expect a child to understand what meditation is for doesn't make any sense. So as you said, you can't cure a child's unhappiness by forcing them to do stuff that's going to make them more unhappy.
But actually, it was worse than that because it was quite harmful. You were sent to do dynamic meditation, which was, I think, 5 or 5:30 in the morning, in a room full of adults, many of whom were probably half naked. Dynamic meditation is an expressive form of meditation. So, there's 15 minutes, as I recall. I've quite a good memory of that because I've done plenty. About 15 minutes during the meditation where you're supposed to just scream, shout, let out all sorts of emotions. So can you imagine throwing a bunch of children in a room with lots of adults sweating and screaming and shouting
At 5 o'clock in the morning?
At 5:30 in the morning. I mean, this is just in itself highly traumatizing, I think. And your parents are not there, so you kind of you do as you're told.
So at this point, your parents are in other parts of the world, or your parents just aren't attending the meditation classes?
Well, that was in Medina, so I was there on my own. I was 9, my brother was 4, and
Wow.
we lived there without our parents. I saw my mother once every 3 months. She was working in a commune in a different country. She was working in Germany. We barely spoke on the phone because we weren't really allowed to very much. And I barely saw her. And so that was, when I say that was the worst time, that was really the worst time because there was no safety whatsoever.
So when you have these headmasters that end up becoming known to people as savage pedophiles, those environments are inviting in predators where there is no oversight or safeguarding from your primary caregivers at that point.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, and I was very, very lucky that I wasn't at the school when he had already left to go and set up something else, or maybe something came to light and they sent him away. I don't know. In fact, he's still around at large. He's never gone to prison, unfortunately. There are multiple accounts of abuse by this man.
And I wondered, because of how many children you didn't see in the documentary, whether you and your brother were a rarity. But it sounds as though actually there were a large number of children, at least in some of these communes that you experienced, where there were too few adults and too many kids.
Well, the communes were really a device to get children out of the way at that point. So Medina started as a commune, and then it became a school. And then there were like different smaller communities all around. And then the Sheila Rajneeshpuram times started becoming the problems, and the criminalities started growing and growing and growing. And her power became more and more, and then she started dictating all sorts of things, and one of them was to close all the small communities or communes, and to send all the kids to these larger communes. I don't know how many of them were there. I think Medina was the main one, and so we are all kind of shipped there basically
Right.
to get us out of the way, and for the adults to be able to work in the discos, in the restaurants, wherever they were needed, basically.
So was there ever a point where you were reunited as a family unit in Rancho Rajneesh?
That was at the beginning, so it happened the other way around. We went as a family to the ranch to visit the
Oh,
ranch residents. So there was a group of ranch residents. Most of the sannyasins actually just went there to visit and to gather together. And my parents were not residents of the ranch, but my mother did live in the communes during the ranch times, and me and my brother lived in communes during the ranch times.
right. Okay. So when you went to visit Oregon, at what stage was the ranch in? Because we've seen from the documentary that it was really built up to be like a working town. Everything was built from nothing to irrigation, all of the plumbing, electricity, anything you could think of. They had people there who were devoted to Rajneesh who could accomplish those tasks. Do you remember what it looked like when you went to visit?
Yeah, I do. I have very clear memories of what it looked like. It was vast, huge, and I remember sleeping in a tent as a family. I remember the big sort of eating areas. I remember the discourses, the big hall where we all had to bow down to the guru 3 times. Yeah, and as a surrender ritual. What else? I remember yellow buses and riding in those buses without, yeah, anyone attending to us, really. I mean, there was like complete freedom for children, but that freedom also came with a lack of protection and a lack of care, I think. I don't think, I know. And yeah, fortunately, again, for me, I was only there for a summer festival, so I didn't end up living there and experiencing or witnessing some of the horrific child abuses that took place, which was actually now finally made public in the Sunday Times article that came out recently.
I wonder if there were any long-term friendships that you were able to forge despite your constant upheaval when you were younger, or people that you're still in touch with now.
From that time,
Yeah.
nobody,
Nobody, nobody at all.
nobody at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you come across people when you speak, you realize that you were in the same place at the same time, but didn't like cross paths?
Actually, more recently, I have formed a support group with other former children, and Lily. Actually, Lily was a big catalyst for that through her articles, and it sort of got me back interested in delving into my past, because I kind of had put it aside for many years. And her and Marusha, the documentary maker, you may have watched her film or not. And so it turns out that Marusha and I were in Medina together at the same time, but she's a few years older than me, so we didn't really spend a lot of time together. But we discovered that she slept in the room next to mine, and we
Oh,
shared a
wow.
bathroom. Yeah, so that was quite interesting, and that she knew some of the other Dutch kids that I spent time with in here, the small commune school in the Netherlands. So yes, but yeah, most children. I mean, I remember some of them, but I don't remember a lot of it because it was so fleeting. It was for a period of 5 years, but also I moved around for those 5 years, so there was no, you know, it wasn't enough time for these relationships to be built and for them to continue. That is not the case for other children who were very much who spent a lot of time in Medina, who spent a lot of time in the ranch. Perhaps there was a more close-knit group, a core close-knit group, which is great for them. But yeah, I didn't have that experience.
So perhaps one of the reasons that we didn't see children running around in the back of any of the footage that was in the documentary that came from the ranch was because Ma and Aunt Sheila at one point decided that the children were a hindrance, too much of a responsibility or a resource, taking too much time and attention away from their agenda of building up the ranch and taking over Oregon, and complete devotion to Rajneesh, essentially. So she orchestrated your being placed in different parts of the world.
I don't know if it happened quite like that. I think I think I have to. You probably have to check those facts with somebody else who knows more accurately. But in my experience, the ranch was not allowing children to reside there, but there were some children who were residing there as a result, I think, of their parents being core residents of the ranch. Not that they saw their parents very much, but people living and working there, and their children were sleeping in separate quarters. Okay, but they didn't want children there. To be clear, they couldn't get rid of the children, but they didn't really want children there. In terms of the communes, not everybody could live in Rajneeshpuram or even Pune. So there were all these communes that were springing up in Europe. And these communes, to be clear, they made a lot of money, yeah, and this money was sent over to Oregon, you know, so it was a business, it was an enterprise. And we had, I mean, they had to have somewhere to put the children for the people who were working in the European communes at night in the discos, as they were called, and restaurants and so on. You couldn't have kids there running around, so they sent all the children to this commune school here in the UK.
Which area of the UK was it located in?
It was in Suffolk. Herringswell near Bury St Edmunds.
Oh my goodness. It's wild because you just don't think those things could be happening anywhere near you.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can go and visit it if you want it. It's been turned into apartments.
So Suffolk's quite a rural, flat part of England.
Yeah.
Do you think that that was intentional to locate the commune in a perhaps more isolated part of the country?
I think there was definitely an intention to locate the commune in an isolated part of the country. What made them choose that part of the country, I can't tell you. Maybe somebody else would be able to say. But it was definitely very isolated, and I think that was absolutely intentional.
It could have been somebody's property. I know that a lot of people signed over their property to the movement. So I wonder if that was chosen because somebody happened to just own a large enough plot of land. And what did it look like? Was it kind of like farmland? Did it have a few acres, or was it just a really kind of big townhouse that could just fit a load of people inside?
No, there were definitely acreage, you know, a lot of grounds. It was a big stately home, huge stately home with other houses dotted around it. So Yeah, so there was a main house, which was very grand, and then there were other houses, I think 2 or 3 houses around it. And yeah, and I lived in one of them, but there was the main house where all where the kitchen and the main hall and the so-called school was supposed to be. And there was a bar downstairs for the adults, and yeah.
We've mentioned a little bit about how families are and relationships and sexuality are often weaponized in high demand religious groups or in cult-like environments. And often that comes with the separation of not only parents from their children, but also siblings from each other. So I wonder if you got to stay with your tiny brother whilst all of this stuff was happening. Did you know where he was? Did you get to kind of take him under your wing?
I barely saw him because they separated the children by ages. And so I was put in one house with other children my age. Then there was a huge house for children, I think younger than me, I remember, and with bunk beds, so a huge kind of dormitory for younger children. And then there were the young children who were, I think, as I remember, either in the main house or in a separate house. And these kids obviously needed more supervision, but I barely saw him.
He was so young when your parents became involved. I mean, it must have been confusing, so confusing for the both of you, but for different reasons. I mean, you recognize at your age, I imagine, that your parents aren't there when they should be there. And your brother maybe perhaps is wondering where that parental connection is because once you're a certain age, you start to recognize who mum and dad are or who your primary caregivers are and recognize that that's safe for you. But that sounds as though your brother didn't even have a chance to recognize who those people were in his life before your parents went back to work for Rajneesh.
Yes, quite right. And I think I remember a lot more than he does. A lot of his memories are buried. He doesn't really want to know. And yeah, and we can't really have a conversation about it either because he doesn't want to know and he doesn't remember a lot of it. But the attachment damage that has caused for both of us in different developmental stages is very clear. And in fact, not just for the two of us, but for all the kids, I think, that were separated from their parents and who were abused or were neglected, abandoned, etc. I think everyone has their own story to tell. I can only really speak for myself.
In these schools and homes that you were sent to live in, this is probably a sensitive question, so I should put a warning out there before I ask you and also for the listeners. The movement did encourage open sexuality. Were there instances where the children were expected to be openly sexual in the same way that the adults were?
Well, it's a very good question because it's not as straightforward as that. Adults are role models for children, right? And if adults are following a guru that is telling them how to behave sexually within that cult, then children are going to be observing the adults, like that children absorb adult behavior like sponges. And so if this was being encouraged, it was being let's say it was behavior that was seen as positive. And there was definitely a strong message about how to be a good sannyasin. Yeah? And this applied to anyone, whether it was adults or children. And so the children would idealize and imitate what the adults were doing because this is what gave them kudos, recognition, and this is how it works in every family, in every group, I think. So when adults behave in a sexually permissive way, when children are not protected, when sex with minors is normalized and even encouraged, then children will think that this is normal, even though something within them may feel that this is not right. So I think there was something about overriding those feelings. Yeah, we're constantly overriding something that we should be encouraged to feel naturally, which is to protect ourselves. And you were encouraged to do the opposite of that. You're encouraged to break your defenses.
When you were living in the communes with the other children, was it common for you to see adults engaging in sexual practices with each other?
Yes. Yeah.
So it wasn't. So I know that it was something to be encouraged, but it wasn't openly hidden from children or vulnerable members of the community.
No, it was not, and that is considered child abuse because it's very overwhelming for children to be exposed to these sorts of adult sexual behavior without children really. It's not about being sexually suppressed. It's about age appropriate information that children can process, right? And he was really encouraging that, saying that children were it was okay for children to be in the room with their parents while they were making love. And he was, saying talking all sorts of rubbish about what children should and shouldn't do, and how children develop, and the relationship of children to sexuality. I mean, it's such nonsense, and people were buying all this rubbish, and children were, I think, a huge casualty of this, because it's too overwhelming, to be in an environment where people are that sexually expressive, where they're, having sex in front of you without caring, what's going on for the child, where people are being emotionally expressive to a degree that it's also very overwhelming and frightening for children. The adults need to explain the world to children, as and this happens very slowly and in an age appropriate way, and there was no care for that, and there was no knowledge about that. And this happens in a lot of cults, unfortunately, where children, the vulnerable people within the cult, children are very vulnerable, are the ones that end up suffering the most.
One of the things that you're taught to look out for when working with children in regards to potential sexual abuse that the child might have been subjected to is over sexualization.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in an environment where it is seen as normal to be around such sexualized behavior, if that child was to then go to school and try to or just behave with other children in the way that they've seen the adults around them behave, that would raise some serious questions on what was happening in those particular places. But I don't know if you would have ever been given access to local schools or environments for that to happen.
No, it was an isolated place, and I think there were some school inspections, and they always like put all the boys together, all the girls together, and sort of tidied everything up so that the inspectors wouldn't feel alarmed by, but yeah, it was so isolated, and we were considered an anomaly anyway. So unfortunately, the school should have been closed down if anyone knew what was really going on there.
For predators in those environments as well, it may have been easier for them to say, to be a proper sannyasin, this is how we do things. And so not only is there a system of coercion in place from Rajneesh in the first place, but then there's also sub-levels of coercion taking place between abusers in positions of power against vulnerable members of the community. And that might extend to adults suffering with disabilities and ill mental health, as well as the children in those environments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, no understanding of mental illness, and people were encouraged to stop taking their medication, and there were, you know, psychotic breaks. I've seen plenty of them. Now I understand them as psychotic breaks. But as an adult, when I went back to India, to the ashram, I could see that around me, and I was with my psychotherapy lens on, I can understand what was going on there. And going back to the school thing, I think it very much suited some men to be in that sexually permissive environment, because if you were not accountable, if if people were encouraged to be sexual with each other, and if there was no protection for the children, and nobody was questioning if a 30-year-old man raped a 13-year-old girl, nobody questioned that. So it was very convenient, actually, for these men, and there are cases where women also abused underage boys, and I'm sure there was same-sex abuse there too, and so yeah, it was very convenient. It was isolated in the middle of nowhere. Children had no protection. There were no proper school inspections. We were living outside of society, and it was really a perfect storm for abuse to take place.
You can't sterilize children either. So I imagine that there is the potential for a lot of child pregnancies to happen in environments such as these as well. Is that something that you ever experienced?
I have not experienced it, but I know that there were underage girls who did get sterilized.
Oh my goodness. Who would even agree to do that procedure? So at the end of your 5 years of complete chaos, is it the closing of the ranch that brings your family back together again? How, when, and why did you officially leave the Rajneesh movement?
Well, everybody was sent back after the collapse of Rajneeshpuram and the closure of the communes. We were basically put in a taxi, our tickets paid for, and off you go back to your home country. So we then reunited as a family in Brazil, and I went back to normal school until I was 18 years old. I went to university, and unfortunately at 18, I went back to the ashram in Pune with my mother for a visit and got sucked into the whole thing again. But between the ages of 11 to 18, I then had I had normal schooling, and I did my university exams. I went to university for a while, and unfortunately, got sucked back into the cult when I was 18.
Was the adjustment period after those 5 years easy for you as a resilient child going back into mainstream education to forge typical friendships and understand the education system and to recognize that you could have structure then after those 5 years?
Well, we were all changed by the whole experience, and I did feel like a complete alien going back. But going back into society was definitely better than what I had experienced previously. So I was already psychologically changed after those 5 years, because 5 years in the life of a child, from 5 to 10 or 6 to 11 is huge. And if you missed out on education, and if you had been moved, if you moved around a lot, from country to country and had no security, that does something to a child's development, and it certainly did for me. And I think the sad thing was that I was a pretty bright and academic child who was missing out on schooling, and it was hard going back. I mean, academically, I caught up, no problem, but there were gaps. There were definitely gaps.
Did your teachers have to be made aware of your circumstances in
Oh,
case there
nobody
was...
talked about it.
No?
No, absolutely not. No, nobody talked about it.
I just wondered if there would have to be any conversations regarding why your behavior might be a little bit strange to other children.
I mean, I wouldn't say my behavior was strange necessarily, because looking back, I think I tried to fit in pretty quickly, and I made friends. As children do, they adapt to school life, etc. But I think internally there was something I definitely felt different, and I definitely felt less confident when I went back.
And this would have been your brother's first experience of formal education.
It would be.
Wow, it'd be interesting to know how that felt for him at that time. But you must have had all of these questions for him, and not having that conversation must be strange as well.
But also you have to be willing to go back into your childhood and remember those things. And we often block out painful memories, and which is a very normal defense, a very normal psychological defense. And if those memories are blocked for him and he doesn't want to access them or remember them, then there's a reason for that. I think there was a lot of pain for him, and that he hasn't really addressed.
So when you turn 18 and you decide to travel over to the ashram in India with your mum, was this a trip that she had asked you to come along just for kind of company's sake, if just to kind of show you around?
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
So even after the collapse of Rancho Rajneesh, your mum remained a devotee of...
Both my parents remained a devotee. And my God, the narrative, the cover-up of the criminality, it was
I was going to ask you
unbelievable.
this.
Absolutely. I mean, the organization did such a good job of covering up and creating their own story. That the American government had poisoned Osho, and that he was an innocent man, and that he was this passive vegetarian man. And I mean, it's sickening, really, what they came up with. The narrative that glorified the guru, absolved him of all criminality, and because the American government did a deal with him and deported him back to India, so they could just basically make up whatever they wanted to.
Right. So you weren't put in the taxis as children and said, "Oh, you're going back to your home countries now because these are all of the things that have happened over in Oregon."
No, it was all Sheila's fault. Because she also went to prison. I know he did as well, but she served more time in prison, etc. And they did a deal with him, as I understood it, and sent him back to India. So it was a perfect setup for it all being Sheila's fault. She betrayed. I mean, she was no saint, obviously. Let me be very clear with that. And she was equally psychopathic. But that was the narrative.
Wow. So your mum says, "Hey, come and visit for your 18th birthday." And this ashram's called Pune too.
Well, Pune, it's called Pune, but they have I guess Pune 1 was the very early days of the cult, and then there was Oregon, and Pune 2 was was after Rajneesh Puram, basically.
Wow. So just paint this whole picture for us and tell us this whole story of how you were invited over and how everything changed then.
Well, we traveled there, and it was also familiar to me because of my parents, and also because of my childhood, that I slotted in very, very easily, I think. And of course, you're given a lot of kudos for being a sannyas child. And I suppose there was something very, again, quite permissive and interesting about all the therapy groups, all the meditations, and all the openness. And, so you get sucked into that cult and seduced back into that cultic environment where you're supposed to have these peak experiences and be very, very happy and seek enlightenment and so on. And because of my experiences as a child, I think the normal society, the mundane felt very boring to me. And so this was the seduction, really, that place that was supposed to be special, I think.
Do you feel, as somebody who'd become an adult, there was the potential for you to try and understand what it was that your parents were a part of when you were younger, and to share that connection with them as somebody who had then grown up?
I think there was a lot of recognition for being in the cult from my parents, and especially my father. And if my mother was in it and she was traveling there and she was joining in the activities, and it was just normal to take her daughter with her, there was definitely a sense of belonging.
Oh my goodness, Sam. So how long is it after you turn 18 and you get sucked into everything? How long does that last for?
10 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. I thought you were
Yes.
going to say like 1 or 2 years.
No. I mean, I was in and out, back in Brazil, studying, working, and then I left when I was at university, and went traveling again, went living with sannyasins again, went living in communes again, the few communes that were left. And my God, I wasted so much of my time and my education again. It set me back big time.
Does your brother join you on this trip when you turn 18 to the ashram? Is it like a family affair, or is he really kind of closed himself off from all of that?
No, I went on a trip with my mother. We went to Europe and then Pune for a couple of months, and my brother stayed home. I was 18. He was 14. I don't think, yeah, he didn't come, and he went back later as an adult, but he never really got into the whole thing again.
And the whole 10 years that you are sort of reintegrated into the community, are your parents still devoted that entire time?
Yes, they followed. My father is still
Wow,
still
my
in it. I
goodness.
mean, yes, you cannot say anything wrong about Osho to my
Have they watched the
father.
documentary?
Yes, yes. He watched the documentary. He watched my interviews. He, yeah, he probably read the Sunday Times article, and him along other people who are diehard sannyasins, they will never ever admit that any abuse took place, that there was anything wrong with their guru, and that it's all lies. It's such a gaslighting exercise. It's incredible. Like, we're all telling lies. These abuses never happened. Osho was never an abuser. He was a wonderful man. He was an enlightened man, and he can do no wrong. And people still live in this kind of delusion.
Wow.
It's incredible.
So during these 10 years, you're kind of going to Pune and back again. Are you working independently at this time, or are the whole 10 years as a whole dedicated to, I guess, is it Osho at that point?
Yes, you see, it's a very interesting one, because after the collapse of Rajneeshpuram, people really had to go back in society, and they had to go back into their lives. There was a sense that this wasn't a cult in the same way that cults operate, in that you're all living together and you're all sort of part of the same church and so on and so forth. But I mean, of course, it was a cult. And so you're sort of living in society, but you are a Rajneesh disciple. And then this can be very well disguised because you're no longer wearing the colors of the sun, and people are no longer wearing the necklaces, and so you're kind of going about your daily life, but you still have the picture of this man in your room, and the rooms are still full of his books, and people are still doing his meditations. And because afterwards he was very integrated in his teachings, were integrated into society. It's almost as if you are sort of this spiritual group, but there's nothing really differing you in any way from anyone else in society. So it's not so straightforward.
It's really quite miraculous what the rebranding has done, because when I say Osho or Osho to people, it's almost like people are picturing like the Dalai Lama or somebody who was truly impactful and pure. But then you say, no, he was Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. And, the picture of him with the grey, with his long hair and his beard and his big brown eyes, but also the grey attire that he's wearing. It's quite an infamous picture of him, I think. And when you show people that picture, they're like, oh my goodness, they're not the same. Osho's like this enlightened. No, they are the same person. But people, that's been lost through translation. So that rebranding is really, really quite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for me to. And then obviously, as you said, people quote things that he has said all of the time without really recognizing where those quotes originated from.
Yes. And you talk about rebranding. Yes, it's a very sophisticated enterprise with lots of very skilled professionals behind it. Yeah. From all walks of life, but he, unfortunately, the best of the best were and are still running the enterprise. And very, people from very wealthy backgrounds, from royal backgrounds, he really knew who to bring in to his organization, and hence the success of it.
So after your 10 years of being wrapped up in Rajneesh and all of his teachings and the community, how is it that you finally cut ties with that and reintegrate into typical society?
Well, I was in my late 20s, and I was just full of anxiety, basically, because I realized that I was wasting my life. Education wasn't very encouraged. A traditional path wasn't very encouraged. You're encouraged to just, float through life and believe that you're entitled to anything. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life here? I'm a smart woman. I want to learn. I want to do something with my life. I can't just waste it like this. And I think that was the feeling within me. I was living in Berlin, and I was just really lost, and I had no confidence in myself, and I had to find a way out. And it wasn't such a conscious process like that, but I started finding my way out through being in relationships with people who had nothing to do with Osho, and just getting into society again. It helped that the commune in Berlin disbanded whilst I was there, and so again we had to go back in and find our feet. And yeah, and then it was a very long and arduous journey of getting back into some kind of normality and building a life. And I did that in a very traditional way. After a few years kind of wondering what to do, I decided I met my husband, Mark. He was also wanting to change careers, and we both started training as psychotherapists together. And he helped me keep my feet the ground. He's been a huge part of my recovery, if you like. I don't like the word recovery necessarily, but it's the part of that change. And I spent about 10 years training as a psychotherapist because I wanted to do everything very methodically and very gradually. I didn't want any shortcuts, and so I took my time.
And spending the same amount of time in years from your reintegration into the Rajneesh movement and your 10 years studying as a psychotherapist, do you feel like you had found something that made you feel like you were accomplishing something, that you weren't so lost in your studies as opposed to your 10 years back in with Rajneesh?
Yes, it was very hard, but very rewarding for me because I was quite naturally academic, and I didn't even know that about myself until I got back into academia and started learning. I realized that I enjoyed learning, I enjoyed writing, I enjoyed speaking and thinking. I'm a thinker, and all of this was being wasted. People were not encouraged to think. They were discouraged to think, and this education path is all but it's all rubbish, and traditional psychotherapy, it's all rubbish. So they rubbished everything, and so I think there was something about going against that. And
I was going to say it feels a bit rebellious.
Yeah, very, and to do things properly.
So you spend your 10 years and you finally become a qualified psychotherapist. You're now working in the space, and is learning still a passion for you? Are you still looking at other things that you can study and the sort of, so I imagine that psychotherapy changes all the time with different research and readings and experts and all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely. It's such a great profession in that way because you're constantly learning. And at the moment, I'm learning about cults quite a lot. That's very relevant to my profession. And, I'm really delving very deeply into the whole cult psychology and the guru psychology. So that's my learning at the moment. But yes, I love studying, I love learning, I love reading, and I'm always developing. And this is, for me, very exciting. And every person that I work with, I am constantly learning from them. And as you are doing this podcast
Absolutely,
with so many different people, yeah.
So you found in your life partner somebody that was non-judgmental and understanding of your experiences and able to positively help you work through everything and simultaneously study. The same thing must have been helpful. I imagine that you both have interests in different niche areas of psychotherapy as well, which is an interesting dynamic in itself. What is your relationship like now with your parents and your brother now that you've really moved away from the Rajneesh movement?
Well, difficult, very difficult with my father and my brother. And with my mother, we're working through, but it's also challenging.
Is there any advice that you would offer anybody listening who may have grown up in a high demand environment themselves, or people that may be struggling with their loved ones in terms of rebuilding and repairing relationships that have broken down because of these environments?
Yes, I think that getting out is a huge step, and surrounding yourself with support and resources is vital. And also seeing a therapist that understands where you're coming from, even if they aren't a cult specialist necessarily, that they are able to be curious and learn about cults and the impact of leaving. That rebuilding an identity takes time and effort, and it takes a long time, but it's just so worth it, because something can be done with this experience. I feel very rewarded in kind of looking. It's a difficult journey, and one that is, I think, very necessary as well if you want to ever feel like yourself again, or reclaim yourself again. And cults, they believe in shortcuts, and in life there are no shortcuts, right? And it's an illusion that you can truly develop without putting in the psychological hard work. It takes years. And whether your family is on board with you or not, I think that can be quite frightening, to go against the family, to leave the family. But it is in both with psychotherapy and with cults, because families can be quite cultic in themselves, I think. And for you to find your own psychological autonomy, it is the whole work, I think, is the whole work of personal development.
So there's no shortcuts to personal development, despite whatever it is that the charismatic leader may be offering or promising you. I think that's really important to look at in terms of all of the groups that we've mentioned today and the specific things that those groups and leaders might be promising their followers.
Yeah, they're promising to take the pain away, and they can't, because it's not theirs to take, so.
Wow, yeah. Oh my goodness. So Sam, Jahara, thank you so much for your time today, for coming and offering us some insight into something that I really didn't know anything about until our discussion today, in regards to the children of the Rajneesh movement, and where were they? All over the place, in all different countries, sent away from their parents, sent away from their families, to exist away from where all of the, air quotes, important work of the movement was taking place. I think this is incredibly important to put a spotlight onto, and anybody else that's had similar experiences, please come forward if you'd like to talk on the record. You can email me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com. I will also put a link to Sam's website for her psychotherapy work, which is with Brighton and Hove. And I know that we've mentioned that your work is not currently specific to cult survivors, but I know that there are people who listen that have been impacted by coercive environments that aren't necessarily cultic. So that's important to remember as well. So Brighton and Hove, I'll put a website link in the episode description for that as well. And thank you so much, Sam, for your time today and willing to be open with us and for giving us this education.
Thank you for the work that you are doing. It's very important.
That
and it is really
the second and final part of this mini-series on the children of the Rajneesh movement. To get in touch with Sam Jahara, please visit brightonandhovepsychotherapy.com or follow the link in the episode description. Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Episodes, you can sign up at patreon.com/thecultvault for only £1 a month.
Bye.
To get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.